Hi guys, sorry it has been a while. A while was a bit of a understatement really. It's been forever. I've been largely neglecting my YouTube channel and I do apologise for this. But you've heard it all before. So without going into too much detail, I've just been trying to concentrate quite a lot on Strangebox, my company. And everything's going well, but it's just not left me much time to be knocking out some tutorials. But I've got a bit of spare time today whilst I'm waiting for some clients to come back to me. I've had a few offers lately of people asking me to come and teach for them and create courses, etc. Of which I'm kind of possibly looking into. So I'll keep you informed on that. Just going to close my studio door. Okay, a little bit less noisy now. Alright, so today we're going to be looking at V-Ray render layers. So if you're not a V-Ray user, then this is probably not for you. But if you are, I'm just going to throw in a couple of little tips here as well regarding render layers and kind of rendering and lighting. We're going to cover a few things fairly quickly, so keep up if you can. If not, pause the video, go back, etc, etc. The beauty of YouTube. Right, so we've got a simple scene. We've got a sphere, a cube, and some triangles on a plane. Wow. We've got a dome light, and the dome light has got spherical switched on, and we have got a HDRI texture plugged in to the texture node of the dome light. Okay, before we go any further into render layers, I just want to show you something which is a little workaround that I do. So currently we've just rendered this image very quickly, and we have got invisible switched off. That means that we're getting all the reflections and light from the we're getting all of the light from the dome light hitting the surfaces, bouncing around and that, and we're also getting the colour information showing up as reflections inside reflective objects, which is great. But what we haven't got is an alpha channel, because we are showing the background of the texture on the dome light. So if we switch that off, have a little looky here. So that's all good. We've lost the background and we've got an alpha channel now. But if you notice, we've also got this black area here. I don't really know why this is going on, to be honest, because the reflections are showing up in the top part of the sphere, but not in the bottom part. It's almost like a bug or something where it loses its spherical information. So a way around this I've found is to leave that switched off, but just create a sphere in the background with the same HDRI texture plugged into it. And if we render now, we'll get those reflections back. And in many ways it's more easy to tweak it now that it's on a sphere. So just something to keep in mind. And you may well want to tweak the ambience or the illumination of that sphere accordingly. Right, so we've got some layers. Hurrah. Sorry, we've got an image. So we want to be looking at some render layers today, and I'm going to show you some render layers that are maybe not initially quite straightforward for you to set up, or whether you'd even thought about them. The first one, most excitingly, is the extra texture node. So some of you may be wondering about getting ambient occlusion out of your renders really simply without setting up some kind of bonkers shader, and this is the way to do it, in my opinion. So we'll just, in the render layers tab, if we just click on extra texture and we hit add, and we see it in here, and we'll just click on that and we'll open up the little box down here. Actually, we'll just open the V-Ray section up. Okay, so we can see there we can plug in a file name or we can plug in a texture. So let's get the Hypershade open. This is so easy, you'll kick yourself for not having used this method in the past. And we're just going to scroll down and we're going to look for the V-Ray Dirt shader, which is here. So now we've got the V-Ray Dirt shader, and we'll just click on that extra texture again, and we're going to middle mouse drag into the texture node, like so. By double click on this, we can actually get to the properties of the V-Ray Dirt shader, which is basically an ambient occlusion shader. So if we click render now, going to see that obviously nothing shows up, which is perfectly fine, normal. Let's give that a minute. And if we go to the drop down menu now, we've now got one that says V-Ray Dirt. Click on that, we can see we've got ambient occlusion. Okay, so it's fairly straightforward. And if we want to tighten it up or add more divisions to subdivisions so we get less grainy image, we can do so here. We can tighten it as well, so there's the occlusion is tighter, and there's all sorts of fall off and other flim flams which you can get all excited about in your own time. Let's just do another quick render while we've got that layer open. We can see it's tighter and smoother now. So look how quick that was. Quicker, and you're getting it for free as well. You're not having to do an extra render layer with an extra shader or whatnot. And this will composite nicely in After Effects or Nuke or whatever you guys fancy using. Okay, so that's the first one. That's the ambient occlusion look plugged into V-Ray Extra Texture. Ugh, get my words in a mucking fuddle. Alright, so whilst we're here, let's create another one. Bam! Extra Texture 1. Let's go into the render editor, Hypershade, and we're going to look for a Fresnel. You may have heard of Fresnel, but maybe not combined with V-Ray render layers. So here we go, we've got a Fresnel node, and let's just click on the extra texture again, and we're going to drop that into there, like so. And we're going to do another render. Just go back here, let's get rid of this. So a quick render. Fresnel's another nice render layer that you can create to use in your compositions. Just gives you some extra tweakable areas. You will see in a second. Works nicely for things like tires and stuff. Some great highlights and bits and bobs in there. So let's just go to Fresnel and have a look. Okay, so you see you've got that kind of cell shaded look. So we've got highlights around the side, lowlights in the middle, mid-tones and that kind of thing. So if we click on the Fresnel shader, we can change the index of refraction. Let's just scroll down a bit and just render a little section here to get a slightly different look. So this might be good if you're doing some kind of micro rendering or somewhere where you want to pick out the highlights around the edge of your model. So we can go on like that, creating other extra texture nodes. I haven't actually tried it with V-Ray edges, but let's just do it. Let's get an edges in here. Let's just go back. So for every new render layer, new experiment you want to try, you'll need to create another extra texture node. I'm getting fed up saying that because it's going to go very wrong in a minute. And we're just going to drag the edges texture into here. Let's just go and have a look at the edges node, pixels set to 1, show hidden edges. So this is if you want to show like triangles and stuff like that within your mesh. Let's just give it a go, shall we? Hit render. Okay, beauty about V-Ray is that we can look for our layers whilst it's rendering. So let's just have a look at the edges. Yeah, it works lovely jubbly. So that's another lightning quick way for you to get edges out and use them in your composition if you're after that kind of look. So basically, I know a lot of people like to show off their models, so this is a really quick way of doing it. So in terms of compositing, you can just kind of fade this up over time over the top of a occlusion as well, Fresnel, and of course the RGB. We can tweak the pixel size of the edges if we want thinner edges. You can also achieve that in post with a little matte if you wanted as well, but I'll just show you here. It starts to go a bit grainy after a while if you go down too low. I'm sure if we up the samples it'd be better. Let's just try world units, see if that makes any goddamn difference. This all goes a bit crazy. Just escape out of that and bring this down. Try it again. Just want to see if it looks better than using pixels. No, it's a fairly similar affair, to be honest. It looks sort of the same. So whatever floats your boat with that. Got anything else in here? I don't know, Fresnel, Vertex, Colours, Water, whatever you like. Just try plugging in a load of different things into that extra texture. That is a really good method of getting some render layers out quickly. Okay, so next up, something that may destroy people's minds is a thing called multimap. Right, so I'm going to go through this really quickly. It's not as hard as you think, but there are some things to look out for. So the first thing I want to do, and there are a huge difference between, well, a little difference between object IDs, render IDs, and multimats, but they kind of work hand in hand next to each other. Hang on, my microphone had gone a bit mad there. It's gone a bit fuzzy wuzzy. Hang on. Damn. Right, that'll do. Okay, so first thing we want to do is we want to click Add on Object ID. So now we've got an Object ID node. That's kind of telling V-Ray that it can add an attribute into the various meshes that we've got in our scene called Object ID. And we're going to need to assign Object IDs to each mesh. We're also going to create a multimat, the first of probably a few. And we're going to look at that in a minute. So the first thing we're going to do is going to go into our scene and see what's what. So firstly, the sphere. So with the sphere shape open, we're just going to go to Attributes, V-Ray, and we're going to plug in an Object ID. That's going to give you a little extra attribute down here and somewhere where you can put a number in. It's probably good if you've got a million things in your scene is to get a bit of paper, if you're old-fashioned like me or whatever, and start writing numbers down that correspond to the shapes you've got, the geometry you've got in your scene. So we're going to go with 1 on this. Alright, we're going to click on the cube and we're going to go Attributes, V-Ray, Object ID, and guess what, we're going to go 2. And then the last one, I just want to show you a little something different. I've put this bunch of tries inside a group, okay, and I'll just show you that we can also add an Object ID to a group, and we'll stick in number 3 there. So with those selected and with all those Object IDs assigned, let's go and have a look at the multi-map. So with the multi-map open here, you can see that we've got a red, green and a blue Object ID, and yes, you've guessed it, we're just going to go 1, 2, 3, which corresponds to our shapes in the scene, and we're just going to hit render. Now the reason obviously that we create a multi-mat and we want to separate these objects out is that so we can indeed work on objects singularly in post, in compositing. So if some of these objects overlapped, we'd still be able to work on one of the objects that was only sort of partially in view because we've got a specific solid colour channel for it. So if we go down to multi-mat, we can now see red, green, blue. Lovely jubbly, it's as simple as that. So this is another render layer we can take into post-production now. We can just work on the blue channel, which means we're just going to be working on this object, the green and the red, etc. And if these guys were overlapping, it means we don't have to set up a million render layers and start faffing around like that. Something to look out for, which is another reason that I put these triangles in a group, is if you've been passed a scene by someone or you're working with an object that's got lots of old object IDs in it or something like that, you can come across a problem where the group might have an object ID and also the shapes within it have got an object ID as well, and what they'll do is they'll conflict and the original object ID that was implemented will be the one that shows. So if this try wasn't showing up, the best thing to do would be to go through and see if there was indeed an object ID added with some kind of arbitrary number which was causing some kind of conflict. That's how to troubleshoot it. So you just come down here, see that there's one there, go there and untick that, just double check that your attribute was still on the group. Something I've come into issues with before. So next up, what do we do if we want the floor as well? How does that work? Because we know we can only use 3 color channels, red, green and blue. Well, it's quite simple really. We're just going to go and create another multi-map. Add that, so we've got multi-map 1. We've got another red, green and blue bunch of channels. Let's just select our floor. We're going to add the attribute object ID to it, and we're going to call this floor. Okay, so we'll go back to the multi-map, and I don't know what colour we'll do. We'll just go with a red 4. So they're talking to each other now. Another quick render. And we can see whilst we're going through it, let's just go to multi-map 1. We've got red, green, blue about to show up over here. And if we go to multi-map 1, there we go. We've got the red channel, and it's cut out the other objects, obviously because they're overlapping and they don't correspond to this red channel. So you can go on like that. I've had it before recently on a project where we had, I think it was 20 multi-mats, all with you know, different things plugged in. So you do need to keep a tab on it, especially if you're working on something like a complex car, well, with all of the parts of the car separated. But you will find that if you're just working in 3D and you're passing your files over to a compositor, so if you're about to take a contract somewhere and you're not quite sure about your multi-mats, this is what you'll need to do. And the Nuke compositors will want as many multi-mats as possible. It's never really too much for them. They'll just not use what they don't want to use. But right down to car badges and headlights, etc., you'll want to separate all of that stuff out for them, so they've got enough stuff. What you don't want is them coming back saying, can I have another multi-map? I didn't get one for the door handle or the wheel and the wheel nuts. So just do as many as possible. They're rendered for free. Yeah, rock and roll really. So that's multi-mats, explained quite simply, hopefully. Also, if you were to be using something like an object ID alone or a material ID alone, if you've ever tried that, you will see that you can get some really poor aliasing around stuff. So this is by far the best way because everything's anti-aliased nicely. So the other ones I'd probably plug in are diffuse, which is hopefully straightforward, reflection, refraction, because we've got a glass ball in here, so it's going to have reflections and refractions. Woo! Specular, if you've got any specular, shadow, if you've got any shadow, lighting. GI I like to put in if I'm rendering with global illumination. I'm getting flickering in my scenes or whatever. It's a good way to troubleshoot. Z depth. We'll stick that in there as well. I mean, you know, all this stuff's free. It just happens at render stage, so you might as well put in as much as possible. Velocity I don't use often at all. I've passed it over to compositors before. They still seem to like, on occasion, actual real motion blur. But yeah, that's another story. Okay, so let's just go back to RGB, do a quick render, and we'll just have a look through some of those render layers really quickly. So there we go, finished render. Let's start having a look through, shall we? I'm not going to go through stuff that we've been through before, so we know about the dirt, which is ambient occlusion, Fresnel, edges, object ID we don't need to look at, multi-map 1 and 2, we know about those. Let's just have a look at diffuse. Diffuse is just solid diffuse colour, can be very handy. Then we've got reflect, so these are the only reflective objects in the scene, and obviously in post we can tweak these to get, you know, more or less reflections, blur them, etc. We're going to refract. The only thing refracting is this, and we can see that because it's glass, it's got an index of refraction, and it is indeed refracting in the environment, which is great. Again, tweakable to give you a better look. There's no actual direct specularity in the scene. Shadow, yes, we've got shadow here. Another good thing about looking at the shadow is that this is the shadow that's coming direct from the dome light, and we can see that there's quite a bit of noise in there. So it's a good way of troubleshooting what's causing you noise within your scene. So we can see that it's the shadow, so if we wanted to correct that, we would just go into the outliner, go to the dome light, and we can just see that its samples aren't particularly high, so we might want to stick them up to 24, and then we could just render a small area, so like here, and start troubleshooting, see if we've improved the sample rate, and hence given a less grainy texture. But because we've got a multi-matte on this, we could all sort of flatten it out within post anyway. So sometimes it's you've got to weigh one up against the other, high render time versus your post skills. And the other thing I just thought of, which has just escaped me, yeah, just quickly, if you are happy to render with grain in your scene, or even just the tiniest bit of grain like this area, a good thing to do is to go into your settings and click on time dependent. Now I say this because if you was to render this now with the camera moving around, that grain stays static, as in it follows the camera. So you'll get a really weird look, almost like that grain's kind of superimposed but moving with the camera, and it's not nice. But if you stick on time dependent, that grain will change frame to frame and kind of look like it's stuck to the surface. I'm sure there's some sort of mathematical longer explanation for that, but let's just put it this way: it works if it's on. Okay, that'll help with your grain movement in the scene. Back to the render layers. What else have we got? GI. There's no GI in the scene because I'm not rendering with GI. Even though I get a little bit of a GI look, I'm just rendering with GI off and the dome light. I personally like to do this on animated scenes quite a lot, simply because I don't like faffing around with flickering, and I know that it's not going to flicker if I just use dome light and standard lighting. I know you're going to get a better look, but to be honest, if your post skills and your compositing skills are kind of up there and you know what you're doing, then just render with a dome light really, and more lighting and just a load of render layers, and then just get the look that you want in post. Personally, I always feel it's sort of 40% post, 60% 3D, sometimes more in post, to be honest. But you know, if you wanted your GI to show up in that render layer, let's just have the light cache on and tweak me flim flam. Where is it? Let's just take my passes up to 12 because that's how many cores I've got. And we'll just do a quick render. And we can see we've got a GI coming through now. The render layer. You can also use this for a pass if you want. So there's your GI. That's another good way of troubleshooting stuff as well. If you are rendering animations with GI switched on, you're trying to work out where different splodges, flickering, noise is coming from. It's a good way of troubleshooting. How is my GI actually looking? How many photons, etc. have I got in the scene? Is it splotchy? Is that splotch coming from a texture? Is it coming from a light? Is it coming from our global illumination? But if you've got that GI render layer on, you can troubleshoot where it's coming from. Is it coming from here? Is it coming from the reflection, etc. So the render layers are used for more than just compositing. You don't even have to use them. You could just have them there for troubleshooting purposes. And the other thing I would look at is Z depth, which you're going to want to use if you are going to be compositing and you want some nice blur in your scene. Z depth can sometimes take a bit of tweaking. Let's just have a look here. Actually, let's just turn off global illumination quickly. Off skeet. Render. So Z depth's got its attributes. You can have it either linked to the camera, to the camera's depth, or you can just have it kind of set up through a set of arbitrary attributes. So at the moment our Z depth looks like it's not working the greatest, to be honest. We've got a little bit of light down at the end and some dark here, so obviously what we're after is a gradient for our various depth blur plugins that we use in post-production. This is a bit of a weak image, to be honest, so if we just have a quick look at that render element, depth blur, we can see in here we've got a couple of settings. So usually I just tweak the depth black and the depth white and get them sort of close-ish together, and I'll just faff around with it, to be honest. Let's just try that. It does depend on the scale of your scene as well. If you've got a lot of objects very, very far off, you're going to want to tweak these numbers. But we're getting some more light information in there now. Probably not enough still. We probably want to tweak it a little bit more and get some more darkness closer to the camera. But let's just see when the image finishes rendering. It's not too bad. It would work. For what we're doing, it would work. We can see it's very bright down there, and it comes up pretty damn dark down here. So yeah, that's going to be fine for compositing. You're just going to the plugin will just look at the different color values and give you a blur based on the gradient from white to black. You can also invert that within your preferred plugin, After Effects, Nuke, whatever. So that's about it for render layers, and yeah, I won't go into caustics or anything because we're not doing that today, but yeah, that's it. So hopefully that's helped somewhat. Also, the other thing you can use the Z depth for is lighting. If you want to add like a little bit of fog into your images, you can use this. Maybe we could reverse that in post, but just lay it over in post as an add layer, and then tweak the transparency, and you'll just get that kind of fog in, that you get in real life, where things in the distance look a bit hazy and washed out compared to stuff in the foreground. Hopefully that's helped, guys, and hopefully this will be the start of a load more tutorials. Again, if you weren't a V-Ray person, then excuse me, this wouldn't really apply to you, so I do apologise for that, but there are going to be some more other standard Maya tutorials coming out shortly. Alright guys, take care, good luck, thanks a lot, bye bye.